Welcome to Agents Growth Academy, folks. Class is now in session. I hope you are ready to grow big or go home. I am super excited because we have a guest who I think you're going to love, especially if you're an agency owner, Brenda Sali. She is going to talk about maximizing the value of your agency. It's going to be a great show. Brenda is a senior M&A advisor with Agency Brokerage Consultants. She spent the first 25 years of her career in the telecommunications and high-tech business sectors, advancing to senior sales and marketing positions. Before joining the firm, she spent 7 years building and then selling a property management business. I wonder if she's going to be on HGTV. Brenda has industry designations, Certified Business Intermediary, CBI, Mergers and Acquisitions Master Intermediary, M&AMI, and Business Certified Appraiser, BCA. She also holds a Florida real estate license and is a member of the International Business Brokers Association, IBBA, M&A Source, and Business Brokers of Florida, BBF. For the past 3 years, Brenda has been the recipient of IBBA and M&A Source Sales Awards, most recently receiving the 2020 Platinum Club Award for M&A Source and Platinum Chairman Circle Award for the IBBA. Agency Brokerage Consultants have successfully sold over 220 insurance agencies. Brenda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Reading off all those designations, it sounded like my children were texting me with all these different acronyms that I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I like to write out what they are, just so you know.
Yeah, I know. And isn't that funny? Like, even in the insurance industry itself, I feel like we have so many acronyms like CPCU, CIC, AAI. Like, can we just
Absolutely.
say what it is? That's fantastic. Well, super excited to have you here. I think our audience is going to get a lot out of our conversation today. I'm curious to know, though, you kind of had this switch in your career from telecommunications and high-tech business into M&A. How did that happen?
Well, the reason I went from telecom and high tech into M&A was mainly because I moved from Canada to the US through what's called an E2 visa, which is an investment visa. I had to buy a business in order to obtain the visa.
Got it.
Having acquired the business, I went through the process of Main Street business acquisition. When I decided to sell it 7 years later, I went through it as a seller. So I
Yep.
experienced it both as a buyer and a seller, felt that it was something very interesting to me. So that's why I decided to go into becoming a business broker, which can be translated to M&A advisor.
Awesome. Very good. So maximizing the value of your agency, why is that such an important topic right now? I mean, I feel like we're kind of at a pivotal moment in the insurance industry. We got a lot of gray hair and folks not really having a plan. Why is maximizing the value of their agency so important?
Well, obviously, the terminology of maximizing the value should mean something to everybody because you don't want to leave money on the table. So if you're going to take what the maximum you can get from the marketplace, you need to have an agency that is well run, that has the financials that fit within the model to enable you to take the full amount of money in the marketplace for your agency. And I think that would be important to any business owner. You want to maximize what you can get for the hard work you've done for many, many years in your business.
Sure. And from all the acquisitions, the M&As you've done, how are agencies maximizing that value?
Well, first of all, an agency owner isn't necessarily always a business person.
Mm-hmm.
They come into the industry. We hear this story over and over again that somebody fell into becoming an insurance agent and ended up either falling into their family business or just becoming an insurance agent and turning it into a company by adding other agents, etc. So they may not have the understanding of the financial model
Hmm.
for the insurance industry. So understanding where you need to be relative to what your payroll expense is, what your rent expense is, so that you are attractive to a buyer is something that not most insurance agency owners would know. So
Sure.
that's the first step, is to understand where do you sit currently in the marketplace relative to other agency owners that are running to the model. And you can only do that by having a valuation completed.
Right. Yeah, we did that a couple of years ago in our agency. Actually, a few years ago, right before I took over for my father, who started the agency, because we needed to know what that value was. So for an agent who is considering, who's been thinking, I don't really have a plan. I don't have children who want to take it over. I think my best option is going to be to sell. What would be if somebody came to you and said, "Okay, Brenda, I'm not an expert in this. What are what steps do I take? What do I need to do? How can I maximize this value? What does this look like for me over the next, and how long is that going to take before a sale will go through?"
Excellent question, because this, I probably speak to this every time I do a deal. I just think it would have been nice, because lots of times we take an agency to market within a year of first talking to them.
Hmm.
And one of those reasons is because the market has been so hot with buyers, private equity backed buyers that are buying agencies of all sizes, and the multiples have been strong. So people are going to market not necessarily in the prepared way that would be optimal in a normal market. So
Okay.
let's assume that we have a normal market. Perfect case would be I start talking to you as an agency owner 3 to 5 years before you're ready to actually sell the business.
Wow, that's a
Now,
lot longer
and
than I would
that,
have thought.
yeah, and the reason being is that most buyers are going to look back to 3 years of financials.
Okay.
So you want, especially if they're going to have to get a loan. So depending on the size of your agency and the buyer, if they're needing to have an SBA loan or a lender that's going to be looking through the financials, you want to have as clean of financials as you can. Look at, we like to undo your tax strategy, because everybody's got a tax strategy to minimize what they're going to pay to Uncle Sam.
Hmm.
So you don't want to have adjustments, too many adjustments. So that's what we do, is we adjust out the non-business related items so that you can show what your business really looks like if it wasn't if you weren't running things through it. So you don't want to have a lot of that. So we like to work with you for 3 years to make sure that your financials are truly representative of what it takes to run the agency,
So
and
we're
that
talking
puts you
about
in the best
stripping out.
position.
Are we talking about stripping out like country club dues and and things like that?
you
What
you
what are some of the things you
ultimately,
see people stripping out like that?
well, the question I always ask people when we do that, and we have a valuation team here that the M&A advisor works with through that process. When we ask people questions, when we want to adjust their income statement to a point where it's showing a adjusted net income that truly is reflective of how the business operates, is every time we look at an expense line item, we say, is this required to retain and grow the business?
Ah,
That's
okay.
the magic question.
That's great.
If it is, then it needs to stay.
Yeah.
If it isn't, then you want to understand why doesn't it? And if it's something really crazy that, yeah, I renovated my house, so I said that my office expenses were $10,000 this month because I put in a new kitchen. Well, okay, we can adjust that out. You'd have to show the evidence for that, because a
Right.
buyer's going to say, well, hey, that's a one-time expense. Show me the invoices for that, and where it showed up in your general ledger.
Right.
I'm getting quite detailed, but believe me, when you go through due diligence, that's what a buyer is going to ask you to do. If you're making a big adjustment like that to a line item, they want to know why.
Hmm.
So we work with the agency owners to try and minimize the amount of that, not necessarily for 3 years, but you want to do it at least the last one or two,
Hmm.
because, that's why we like to start working with you at least 3 years before you sell, so that we can get the first year under your belt. You've already got that in play, and then you can focus in on the next 2 years, how you might move things around. You may end up paying more tax for those next 2 years, but it's worth it in the end, because you're going to have a lot more success with attracting buyers that are going to be very interested in your agency and be willing to pay the top price for it.
Sure. And you alluded to a minute ago about it's not just revenues that are the big consideration. You said it a lot of it depends on how well the agency was run. What do you mean by that? And what can agents who are listening to this start to make adjustments to how their agencies run in order to maximize that value?
Okay, well, that goes back to the same thing as the adjustments. When we're recasting, is what the terminology we use, recasting the financials to represent what your business really costs you to operate.
Hmm.
When we do that, not only do we take out the one-time expenses that you're running through the business, but we also look at how are you operating in terms of what's your payroll. How
Okay.
many staff members do you have to drive the revenue that you have in your agency? There is, numbers out in the marketplace as to how much in a personal lines agency, how much should one headcount be able to generate in terms
Hmm.
of commission revenue. So there's all those particular elements that we can look at and share with the agency owner. And if they're not on track to that, they can do some things in the next 2 years. If they've got compensation plans that are way out of whack with what the industry standards are, or what the key buyers in the market are offering, if they're paying 50-50 on personal lines business, that is not necessarily as attractive as if you're more in line with the model of what larger agencies are paying their personal lines agents. So
Sure.
that those are the things that we can provide guidance to when we do evaluation. We understand all of that. We've been doing this so many times that we know what the big buyers are willing to accept, and what they're flexible on, and how much they'll move. And we help the agency owner understand that. And when it comes to, as you indicated, it's not just revenue, it's the net income. It's how much is it costing you to generate that income? Because that, if you're doing a really good job of that, you're going to get the top dollar for your agency. There is a range for what buyers will pay.
Okay. And what are some of the multiples that you're seeing out there right now? And I know it's a wide range because it's going to depend on agency size and things like that, but can you give us any kind of range? And this is in 2021, late 2021.
You bet, because it is different.
Yeah.
Now, okay, here's the deal, and this definitely has generated a lot more activity on the acquisition side of the industry in 2021. There is a lot of dry powder, as we call it, out there in the private equity space,
Hmm.
and that money needs to be spent. And the insurance industry is considered a good bet. It's a low risk industry. Private equity is very interested in it. And even if you have an agency that's 300,000 in commission revenue, private equity firms are prepared to pay a much higher multiple than what they did even 2 years ago.
Hmm.
So, for instance, for myself, the lowest commission agency I sold in 2021 was 500,000 in commission revenue. That sold for 3.25 times revenue.
Wow.
That's yeah, that's
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
become pretty much the standard as the lowest multiple that's being paid. Now, again, we only take quality agencies to market. The buyers that work with us know we represent quality agencies. So when we talk about multiples, these are for agencies that are operating efficiently. They're for agencies that have a good book of business that can be validated and it's of interest to the acquisition partner. It's a nice roll in. It might be a specialty book um, that can fit nicely into what they have already. There's all kinds of reasons why they're paying those kind of multiples, because if it's a lot of them decide, is this in an area where I have another larger agency that I can just roll it in, therefore I can make efficiencies in other parts so I can pay that higher multiple. There's all kinds of factors of which we know and understand because we've worked with these larger buyers for so many years. We have a database of 6,000 prospective buyers, and that doesn't even include the private equity backed ones. These are buyers that are interested in acquiring agencies, and they may require financing. And again, that goes back to my earlier point, is you have to have the good financials to be able to allow your buyer to get the full amount of the financing that they're looking to get. So those are key factors. You don't want to be in a situation where that buyer can't finance the price that you want to get for your agency.
So when you're talking about that 6,000 agency or entity
Prospective
database,
buyer.
buyer of buyers, that's agencies wanting to buy agencies.
Yes, I mean, you know how large the industry is.
Yeah,
There's a lot of small agencies throughout the country, and these buyers aren't necessarily huge companies. They just want to grow by acquisition.
sure.
So, they may not be looking to buy an agency that's 500,000 in commission. They might be looking for 100, 200, 300,000 in commission revenue,
Mm-hmm.
and they just want to start building up their agency through acquisition.
Sure. That's how we grew actually the first half of our life when my father started the company almost 30 years ago. It was mostly through acquisition. And it's been interesting, and that's like actually a question I have, more selfishly than anything, just out of curiosity, because we're in an age now where work from anywhere, as we call it, has become more of a thing. We were already positioned, and I'm sure there's other agencies out there who are like this, who have multiple locations. Over the years, as we've acquired agencies, they've been in different locations. How much of a factor is that into somebody who wants to buy an agency? Is it harder for them to wrap their arms around that there's multiple locations, or maybe people from working remotely or working from anywhere?
Um, Here's the factor. Like I said about payroll and what you're paying how many employees you have, what you're paying your employees. Rent is the other key line item on the P&L, on the
Mm-hmm.
income statement, that we look at and
Mm-hmm.
analyze, and that buyers look at. And we look at, as I said earlier, we've seen hundreds of these. So in that process, the two key expenses that we coach insurance agency owners on over the years that we work with them is the staffing and the payroll,
Yep.
and rent.
Yeah.
So what you don't want to do in advance of selling your agency is sign on to a 5-year lease
Right.
at any of your locations. The fact that you've got multiple locations is not a negative,
Mm-hmm.
but if you've got 5 locations and 5 leases that have 5 years on them, and you want the buyer to have those assigned to them and assume them, it's not overly attractive.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's, if depending on how big the agency is, if you're a smaller agency and you've got 2 or 3 people in 5 different locations, that's an easy roll in for somebody to bring those people into their other office potentially, or have them work from home, given that's such a new option to do, that you don't want them to have to be burdened with, okay, how do I handle the rent now?
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying about running the agency efficiently, I would imagine that technological advances that are allowing us to run our agencies in a more efficient manner, whether that's through add-ons to our agency management system that help with efficiency, or there's tons of insurtech out there right now that is helping not only carriers, but on the agency side, us do things with a whole lot more efficiency in the agency. I have to imagine that that's part of what you're talking about when you talk about efficiency.
Yeah, and it'd be nice. Oh man, you just bring up so many great topics that I could just go into.
Why,
That
thank you.
just rank something different
That's
in
why
my
they pay me
mind.
nothing to do this show.
But the agency management system, the way that is just so critical. And I mean, I've dealt with agencies this year where I had to create the customer list, 2 weeks before closing because they did not have all the detail in the
Oof.
management system because
Oh, wow.
unfortunately they changed management systems 6 months before they sold. These are all the things that are great about working with people for a longer period of time because it's not that we won't sell an agency that we talk to tomorrow, that we won't put them on the market, but these are just pieces of advice that will help people make the process much easier for both them and the buyer if they have a good management system and they put all their data in it.
Yeah,
That their staff need to be trained to make sure that the commission revenue goes in there, that you know the carrier information, all the kinds of detail that you would think somebody would want to know about your business. Obviously you're not telling your staff this, that you're thinking of selling,
sure.
but you can certainly put checks and balances into your business and teach people how you want it done, and they don't have to be suspect of why that is.
Yeah. Gosh, that makes so much sense. And, as somebody, I said we, at the beginning of our agency's life, we were heavy into acquisitions, and we've done a few over the last few years, but we're at a point now where we're ready to start making some more. Really for us, it's adding revenue streams, whether that's, buying a book of business, bringing on a strong producer or two each year, or, buying an agency. And I have to tell you, I mean, when we have started conversations with anybody about that in recent history, I mean, agency management, even when we're hiring people, and that's a big thing, especially in the service side, not just having worked in an agency management system, but for us, we use Applied Epic. Like, hey, we would love somebody that's trained in Epic. And I have to imagine from the acquisition, the M&A standpoint, agencies who are buying other agencies would much rather have, a link there, a common connection on the agency management system, because it's a pain. I mean, even when we moved from, sorry, Applied Systems, but even when we moved from TAM to Epic, you didn't make it easy. Sorry,
No.
love you, but you didn't make it easy for us. And I have to imagine that if you're going from a whole other management system to, a new one from an M&A standpoint, that's got to be a point of contention, and it's got to be tough, right?
Absolutely. The two biggest ones in the larger acquisition side, the agencies that are of a large size that are doing a lot of the acquisitions now either use AMS 360 or Epic.
Right.
And a lot of the agency owners that are being acquired, they're not big enough to be on Epic. It tends to be a scaling situation where Epic doesn't become cost, efficient at a certain level. So, very, very, I don't think I've sold one agency that was already on Epic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they had to go through that conversion, and it's never pretty. But,
Yeah.
that's a thing that it's not so much that you need to go onto a management system that might be easier and attractive to the buyer. It's more just have a good management system, one that can generate effective reports, because you need to be able to create a production report, a book of business report,
Mm,
and do the production by producer, production by carrier, production by, product line, whatever it is. That's what's important and makes it easier during due diligence. I'm not telling everybody to go out and spend a lot of money on management systems, but just get a decent one that's reputable and that you're using properly.
sure. No, this is super valuable, I think, for our audience, because for those who are thinking about it, and if they do have a little bit of time to make these changes, they're able to take some of this actionable content that you're providing right now in terms of, hey, here's what you need to do, gang, to get ready. That's what's important. So fantastic.
Jim, I got to jump in and tell you one that
Yeah.
they need to get ready with. This is something that is so top of mind for us right now
Yeah.
because of the size of agency owners that might be listening to this podcast. A lot of them might be using an aggregator.
Yep.
Very, very common with new agencies when they started up. They could be still with the aggregator 10 plus years later.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing when you're thinking about selling, and this again is why having an exit strategy or thinking and planning in advance, and we would be happy to help, is figure out what you are contracted to provide and how to get out of the aggregator's relationship before you go to market.
That
It
is a one I never would have. Well, I probably would have thought about it, but not soon enough. And we do belong to an aggregator. We were actually founding members of what's now, I think, the fourth largest in the country, Secure Risk. And, just disclaimer, I have no intention to sell my agency right now. I have 3 children who hopefully one day will take over. We would love to buy some agencies, but one day, if none of them want to take it over and we're still with Secure Risk, yeah, that's definitely
well,
what.
and secure risk, I don't think has a lot of binding. What you got to look for is where are the connectors where you have to do a buyout, where you have to pay big money when you try to get out of the agreement. It's better to start negotiating that before you take the business to market, because buyers don't want to have to deal with that mess.
Yeah.
And the seller doesn't need, because a lot of times it's tied. One I just did recently, the buyout was tied to the sale price,
Mm-hmm.
which was horrible because their buyout would have been a lot less if they'd gotten out of it before they had a seller or a buyer, because the buyout was a lot higher because they were
Sure.
basing it on what the agency was selling for.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, I'm glad you got that one in there. Anything else we should know before we jump into our rapid fire round? And I'll give you a chance to give one final piece of advice, but anything else on your mind real quick?
Um, oh God, there's just so many things, but I think it's just about planning and
Yeah.
just and getting evaluation. I mean, although that's going to be my comment in the quick fire, so I'll leave that.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into it. One piece of technology or software that you can't live without in your daily life with business.
My phone.
She's holding up her phone.
Oh my God, I cannot live without that thing because it has my email. It has, I don't even use it as a phone. I use
Yeah.
it as a mini computer, and I would die without it.
Yeah. Well, is that an iPhone or a Android?
No, 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 no iPhone. It's a
No iPhone.
Samsung.
Okay, okay. Well, I was listening to somebody retell the story of when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, and he alluded to what you just said. It was like, hey, there's this thing that or there's these things that like you can have your email here, you can have music here, and you can have a computer. And he kept repeating that, and he said, guys, we've put it all in one device. And it's like, you're right. Now we're trapped. We can't live without it.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. Oh, just you're searching for Wi-Fi everywhere you go, right?
Yeah, our office was actually having an issue with internet this morning, and I'm recording this from home, so I was like, "Ooh, sorry guys." I know. I mean, fortunately we have a failover, so it was just a little slow. But yeah, isn't that crazy? We go nuts when we don't have proper Wi-Fi,
Oh
right?
boy. That brings back my property management days when if the guest didn't have Wi-Fi, if it was down for 5 minutes, they'd be on the phone going, "Oh my God, we have no Wi-Fi."
Panic. All right, one book that you love.
Well, as I was telling you before, my
Yeah.
book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and it's definitely not a new book on the market. This one's been around for many, many years. It's the type of book you can read every year just to remind yourself of what are the good techniques of how to get people to like you, to be able to work effectively with anybody you meet.
That's fantastic. Yes, as I told you before, I actually have never read it, but it is on my list now. And actually, I have something that I want to share with our listeners. This is something new for everybody. Just my free gift to you. If you want to get a free Audible book from Audible, just go to audibletrial.com/grow big. And Brenda, you can do this too if you don't have Audible already. But I listen to books all the time when I'm driving. So audibletrial.com/grow big. What about your favorite, or I think the way I was wanting to phrase it to you is give me an example of a time when you've used storytelling in business that helped you.
Well, this one is interesting in that recently I've been starting to do workshops and webinars, and I think that presenting and conveying a message to anyone, but to the audience of both the workshops and the webinars, it's much easier to convey concepts sometimes by using a story, a story of your own experience at something. Usually it's a personal story, but sometimes it's a reference to a story you're aware of so that it can try and convey in a way that people can visualize and understand the concept much more effectively. Certainly in our day-to-day life as M&A advisors, when we talk to our clients, we like to provide a story of how what we do that led to a great result. And obviously those are the kinds of stories that our clients, that our prospective sellers want to hear.
Sure. And actually, the reason that you and I connected was because of a great story that I heard on the Spot On Insurance podcast from Ted and Arlene Tavares. And that was about how many bidders they had vying for their attention for the business that they sold that you guys helped them with. And what a great story. I loved it. The funny thing about stories for me, I tend to remember where I was when I heard that story, and I can visualize right now where I was in my car. Kind of a funny thing, which tells you that
Right.
stories are so powerful because they interact with our brains on so many different levels, even to the point where we can remember where we were when we heard that, right? What about
Absolutely.
a daily or weekly habit that you feel like has led to your success?
I'm going to tell you about a habit that I use, and I'm hoping that the listeners will find this interesting as well. The habit that I use is called a deal checklist,
A deal
and
checklist.
it has been a godsend. I've become kind of the icon in our office that uses this methodology to ensure that once a opportunity or a deal gets under contract or letter of intent, that we get it to closing, and it keeps everybody on track. We revisit it every week from the time that an agreement was signed till the deal closes, and this is a becomes a daily routine for me when I am in a deal, so that I
Mm-hmm.
can make sure that my client, which is typically the seller,
Mm-hmm.
feels like I am in control of the process at all times.
That's great. Yeah. The checklists are powerful things. I think the human brain is wired to only remember about 3 to 6 different pieces of information at one time. So any more than that, you absolutely need a checklist. And I love that you use that in order to project the sense of confidence, or to instill that sense of confidence in the seller. Um, yeah, it's brilliant. Love it. Love it. What's one final piece of advice that you would give to our listeners?
Well, we've referred to this several times throughout the podcast interview, and that is understanding where you are today. And the
Yeah.
best way to do that is to have a valuation. And it doesn't matter if that's 10 years from when you want to sell or, 1 year, because it just gives you a point in time, a reference point of what you need to do to go forward to get you to your exit or whatever it might be that you're wanting to do. In your case, handing it down to your children, we do valuations that don't end up in taking businesses to market. You know, you just need to understand where you stand today.
Yeah. Love it. The benefit of time and taking action before you put yourself in a position where you're trying to scramble to get things done, and that's not good for anybody. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I get a bonus surprise question for you that you probably weren't aware of. You ready? It's
I'm
not
ready.
a hard one. It's not a hard one.
Okay.
You told me beforehand you could think on your feet. If
All
you,
right.
Brenda, had the choice right now between, well, maybe not right now in this moment in between meals, but between soup or marshmallows, what would you choose?
Soup.
Soup. What kind of soup?
Tomato bisque.
Ooh, yeah. Love it. It's one of my favorites too. Well, I am going to send you a soup package from Spoonful of Comfort, which is a company that we have loved sending to our own employees, and we've started sending them to our podcast guests as a thank you for being on the show. So I'll get your address off air, but it is you're going to love it. I'm telling you, you're going to love it.
So what if I said marshmallows?
Oh, well, marshmallows, that'd be a whole different thing. If you'd rather have marshmallows, I can send you marshmallows.
No, I don't, but maybe, 30 years ago I might have.
Well, the company that we use for marshmallows, and I'll give them a plug here, is Mountain Mallow, and they are out of Colorado. And they have actually authorized me to give our guests a 15% discount on their order if you just use code GROWBIG. And I think it's mountainmallow.com. I got to verify that. But
Is that the
there
one
you
that
go.
does all the different flavored ones?
Yeah. You know about them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Well, now you got a 15% discount code you can use.
Perfect.
So, there you go. Brenda, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and either talk about selling their agency or just have questions for you? What's the best place for them to reach you?
Well, you can call the office, 321-255-1309, or you can email me at bsally@agencybrokerage.com.
Awesome. Can they reach you on LinkedIn too, or are you not
Oh,
usually
yes. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know how to, give you a
there?
way to get there, but you just
your
put in
name.
Brenda Sali.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's
Yeah.
how you do it. So fantastic. Brenda, I have had a great time learning from you, and I know our audience has too. I really appreciate you being on today.
Thank you. I really had fun. I love this. It was great, Jim, and I love talking about this topic. So anybody who wants to talk about all the challenges of selling an agency, give me a call anytime.
Love it. Until next time, folks, grow big or go home.